Princess Alice of United Kingdom was born as Alice Maud Mary on the 25th of April, 1843 at Buckingham Palace in London. She was the third child and second daughter of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Alice was Grand Duchess of Hesse and by Rhine from the 13th of June, 1877 until her death in 1878 as the wife of Grand Duke Louis IV. Alice was the first of Queen Victoria's 9 children to die, and one of 3 to predecease their mother, who died in 1901. Her life had been enwrapped in tragedy since her father's death in 1861. Her sex was greeted with mixed feelings from the public, and even the Privy Council sent a message to Albert expressing its congratulation and condolence on the birth of a second daughter. Alice's birth prompted her parents to find a larger family home. Buckingham Palace was not equipped with the private apartments that Victoria's growing family needed, including suitable nurseries. Therefore, in 1844, Victoria and Albert purchased Osborne House on the Isle of Wight as a family holiday home. Alice's education was devised by her father and his close friend, Baron Stockmar. At Osborne, Alice and her siblings were taught practical skills such as housekeeping, cooking, gardening and carpentry, as well as daily lessons in English, French and German. Victoria and Albert favored a monarchy based on family values. Alice and her siblings, who wore middle-class clothing on a daily basis, slept in sparsely furnished bedrooms with little heating. Alice was fascinated with the world outside the royal household. At Balmoral, where she seemed happiest, she visited the tenants living and working on the estate. On one occasion, she escaped from her governess at the chapel at Windsor Castle and sat in a public pew, so she could better understand people who were not strict adherents to royal protocol. In 1854, during the Crimean War, the 11-year-old Alice toured London hospitals for wounded soldiers with her mother and her eldest sister. She was the most emotionally sensitive of her siblings and was sympathetic to other people's burdens, possessing a sharp tongue and an easily triggered temper. Alice was considered to be one of the most beautiful of Queen Victoria's daughters. When she was a year old, her father mentioned her as the beauty of the family. In her childhood, Alice formed a close relationship with her brother, the Prince of Wales, and her eldest sister, the Princess Royal. Victoria's marriage to Prince Frederick William of Prussia in 1858 greatly upset her. Alice's compassion for other people's suffering established her role as the family caregiver in 1861. Her maternal grandmother Victoria, Duchess of Kent, died at Frogmore on the 16th of March, 1861. Alice had spent much of her time at her grandmother's side, often played the piano for her in Frogmore's drawing room, and nursed her through the final stages of illness. Following her mother's death, the Queen broke down with grief and relied heavily on Alice. Only a few months later, on the 14th of December, 1861, Albert died at Windsor Castle. During his final illness, Alice remained at his bedside. Alice sent for the Prince of Wales by telegram, without the knowledge of the Queen, who refused to notify him because she blamed him for Albert's death. The Queen was distraught by her husband's death, and the court entered a period of intense mourning. Alice became her mother's unofficial secretary, and for the next 6 months, the physical representation of the monarch. Through her passed the Queen's official papers to and from her government ministers, while the Queen secluded herself from all public life. Alice was aided in this task by her younger sister Princess Louise. Alice's matrimonial plans were begun in 1860 by her mother. Queen Victoria had expressed her wish that her children should marry for love, but this did not mean that her choice of suitors would necessarily be extended to anybody outside the royal houses of Europe. Raising a British subject to royalty, however high their rank, was politically objectionable, and also wasted any opportunity for a useful foreign alliance. The Queen instructed her daughter Victoria, recently married to Prince Frederick William of Prussia, to produce a list of eligible princes in Europe. Her search produced only 2 suitable candidates, the Prince of Orange, and Prince Albert of Prussia, cousin to Victoria's husband Frederick William. The Prince of Orange was soon discounted. He journeyed to Windsor Castle so that Queen Victoria could look him over in person, but he proved unpalatable to Alice. The prince too showed little interest in Alice, despite strong pressure from his pro-British mother, Queen Sophie of the Netherlands. Prince Albert, too, was spurned, with Prince Frederick William remarking that his cousin would not do for one who deserves the very best. With both of the leading candidates now discounted, Princess Victoria suggested Prince Louis of Hesse, a minor German royal, the nephew of the Grand Duke of Hesse. Princess Victoria had gone to the court of Hesse to inspect Louis's sister, Princess Anna, as a potential bride for her brother, the Prince of Wales. Although not favorably impressed with Princess Anna, she was impressed with Louis and his brother Prince Henry. Both were invited to Windsor Castle in 1860, ostensibly so they could watch the Ascot races in the company of the royal family, but in reality, the visit was a chance for the Queen to inspect her potential son-in-law. The Queen admired both Louis and Henry, but noted how well Louis and Alice got along together. When the Hessian family departed, Louis requested Alice's photograph, and Alice made it clear that she was attracted to him. Alice was engaged to Prince Louis of Hesse on the 30th of April, 1861, following the Queen's consent. The Queen persuaded the Prime Minister, Lord Palmerston, to secure the agreement of Parliament for Alice to receive a dowry of £30,000, £3.54 million as of 2025. Although the amount was considered generous at the time, Prince Albert remarked that she will not be able to do great things with it in the little realm of Hesse, compared to the riches that her sister Victoria would inherit as future Queen of Prussia and German Empress. Furthermore, the couple's future home in Darmstadt, the Grand Ducal seat, was uncertain. Although Queen Victoria expected that a new palace would be built, the people of Darmstadt did not want to meet that expense, and the resulting controversy caused resentment there. This meant that Alice was unpopular in Darmstadt before she even arrived. Between the engagement and the wedding, Alice's father Prince Albert died on the 14th of December, 1861. Despite the Queen's grief, she ordered that the wedding should continue as planned. On the 1st of July, 1862, Alice and Louis were married privately in the dining room of Osborne House, which was converted into a temporary chapel. The Queen was ushered in by her 4 sons, acting as a living screen blocking her from view, and took her place in an armchair near the altar. Alice was given away by her uncle, Albert's brother Ernest II, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and was flanked by 4 bridesmaids, her younger sisters, Princesses Helena, Louise, and Beatrice, as well as Louis's sister Princess Anna. For the ceremony, Alice wore a simple white dress, with a veil of Honiton lace and a wreath of orange blossom and myrtle, but was required to wear black mourning clothes before and after the ceremony. The Queen, sitting in an armchair, struggled to hold back her tears, and was shielded from view by the Prince of Wales and Prince Alfred, her second son, who cried throughout the service. The weather at Osborne was dreary, with winds blowing up from the Channel. The Queen wrote to her eldest daughter, Victoria, that the ceremony was more of a funeral than a wedding, and remarked to Alfred, Lord Tennyson, that it was the saddest day I can remember. The couple set off for their honeymoon at St. Clair in Rhine, a house lent to them by the Vernon Harcourt family. Alice was careful not to displease the Queen after her marriage. When the Queen visited the couple at St. Clair, Alice tried not to appear too happy. Despite this, Alice's displays of romantic bliss made the Queen jealous of her daughter's happiness. Alice and Louis arrived at Bingen on the 12th of July, 1862, and were greeted by cheering crowds gathered in spite of pouring rain. After being introduced to town officials, they took a train to Mainz, where they had breakfast, before taking a steamer along the Rhine to Gustavsburg. From there, they took a train to Darmstadt, where they were greeted with great enthusiasm. Alice did not adapt immediately to her new surroundings. She was homesick, and could not believe that while she was so far away from England, her father was not still alive and comforting her mother. The question of Alice's residence became an issue after her arrival, with the Grand Duke unwilling to fund a residence befitting a daughter of Queen Victoria with the low Hessian funds. The pair were given a house in Darmstadt's Old Quarter, which overlooked the street. The carts rumbling past could easily be heard through the house's thin walls. However, it seemed to suit Alice well, and she spent as much time in Hesse as possible to familiarize herself with her new surroundings. She took art lessons from the court painter Paul Weber. In 1863, she traveled to England for the marriage of her brother, the Prince of Wales, and Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Alice delivered her first child, Victoria Alberta Elizabeth Mathilde Marie, on the 5th of April in the presence of Queen Victoria. The Darmstadt court chaplain was called over to England especially for the christening. Alice's relationship with her mother became difficult, which would continue until her death. After returning to Darmstadt in May, Alice and Louis were given a new residence, Kranichstein, northeast of Darmstadt. Alice gave birth to her second daughter Elizabeth, nicknamed Ella, On the 1st of November, 1864, Alice's decision to breastfeed her newborn daughter upset her mother, who was against breastfeeding. The Queen was further upset at the realization that Alice, having found true happiness, would be visiting England less and less. Despite being relieved that war was over, Alice was appalled by the behavior of Prussian troops in Hesse. Berlin took the Grand Duchy's railways and telegraph systems, and assessed Hesse for 3 million florins in indemnity. Alice wrote to her mother, who in turn wrote to Princess Victoria, who responded that there was nothing she could do to relieve the painful and distressing position darling Alice was in, as it was one of the unavoidable results of this dreadful war. Influence came from the Emperor of Russia, who urged the Prussian king to allow the Grand Duke to keep his throne. The facts that the Emperor's wife was the Grand Duke's aunt, and Alice's sister being also the Prussian crown princess are likely to have influenced Prussia's generosity. However, Alice was angered by an untactful visit by Princess Victoria to the conquered region of Homburg, originally part of Hesse, shortly after it became Prussian territory. Alice developed a friendship with the theologian David Friedrich Strauss. He was a controversial figure at the time. In 1835, he published The Life of Jesus, which argued that the miracles of Jesus were non-factual myths and that the Bible could not be literally interpreted as God's word, a view akin to heresy in Orthodox circles. Alice's view was similar to Strauss's, and she believed that contemporary Victorian society was presenting God in a way that would be unrecognizable to early Christians. Strauss also offered Alice an intellectual companionship that her husband was not equipped to provide, and he was regularly invited to the new palace to read to Alice privately. The friendship flourished. Strauss was introduced to Alice's sister Victoria and her brother-in-law Frederick William, and he was invited by them to Berlin. In 1870, Strauss wanted to dedicate his new work lectures on Voltaire to Alice, but he was too afraid to ask her. She spared him the need by asking him to dedicate them to her. However, Alice's relationship with Strauss angered Empress Augusta, who labeled Alice a complete atheist after hearing about his promotion. Tragedy befell Alice on the 29th of May, 1873, when her youngest and favorite son, Friedrich, called Fritti, died after falling 20 feet (6.1 meters) from a window. The child suffered from hemophilia, and although he regained consciousness, the internal bleeding could not be stopped. Alice never recovered from Fritti's death, writing to her mother 2 months later, "I feel lower and sadder than ever and miss him so much, so continually." However, the Queen's attention was more focused on the engagement of her son Prince Alfred to the Grand Duchess Marie Alexandrova of Russia, the only surviving daughter of Tsar Alexander II and his first wife, Empress Maria Alexandrova. The Tsar had refused to present his daughter for pre-marriage inspection in England, and instead invited the Queen to meet the family in Germany. Alice supported this suggestion. After Fritti's death, Alice attached herself more closely to her only surviving son, Ernest, and her newborn daughter Marie. In 1875 she resumed her public duties, including fundraising, medical and social work, which had always held her interest. She maintained active correspondence with the social reformer Octavia Hill. However, in these years, relations with her husband deteriorated. In late 1876, she traveled to England for treatment due to an internal complaint caused by a backward curvature of the womb, and remained at Balmoral while she recovered. Despite marital problems, Alice remained a strong supporter of her husband, being highly critical when his abilities or talents were not fully recognized. On the 20th of March, 1877, Louis' father Prince Charles died, making Louis heir apparent. On the 13th of June the same year, Charles' older brother Grand Duke Louis III died, and Louis and Alice became the Grand Duke and Duchess of Hesse. Her continued unpopularity in Darmstadt, however, coupled with her mother not wanting her in England, caused strain, and she and her children spent July and August in Holgate, Normandy, where Louis often visited them. She was hurt by her reputation in Darmstadt, and she became increasingly bitter towards it. Alice and Louis's return to Darmstadt as Grand Duke and Duchess was met with celebration that Alice did not expect. Alice used her new role to reform the social conditions of Darmstadt. While she tried to involve herself in the arts and sciences and distance herself from society protocols, she continued to feel the burden of her duties. In November 1878, the Grand Ducal household fell ill with diphtheria. Alice's eldest daughter Victoria was the first to fall ill, complaining of a stiff neck in the evening of the 5th of November. Diphtheria was diagnosed the following morning, and soon the disease spread to Alice's children Alex, Marie, Irene, and Ernest. Her husband Louis became infected shortly thereafter. Elizabeth was the only child to not fall ill, having been sent away by Alice to the palace of the Princess Charles of Hesse, her mother-in-law. Marie became seriously ill on the 15th of November, and Alice was called to her bedside, but by the time she arrived, Marie had choked to death. Alice kept the news of Marie's death secret from her children for several weeks, but she finally told Ernest in early December. His reaction was even worse than she had anticipated. At first he refused to believe it, as he sat up crying. At first, however, Alice did not fall ill. However, by Saturday the 14th of December, the anniversary of her father's death, she became seriously ill with the diphtheria caught from her son. Her last words were "Dear Papa," and she fell unconscious at 2:30 a.m. Just after 8:30 a.m., she died. Alice was buried on the 18th of December, 1878 at the Grand Ducal Mausoleum at Rosenhof outside Darmstadt, with the Union flag draped over her coffin. A special monument of Alice and her daughter Marie was erected there by Joseph Böhm. She was the first child of Queen Victoria to die, with her mother outliving her by more than 20 years.